Yeah, come on in. JJ, welcome. Yeah, of course. Shake my hand. How's it going, man?
How are you?
Good. How are you feeling? Is this
Could not feel better.
Is that right? Are you on West Coast time? Is this specifically
Where am I sitting?
early? Right there.
I'm on. No, I'm
We're
on.
live on the air, by the way, so don't say anything that.
I promise you, I won't.
Okay, that you wouldn't want to broadcast.
No, I'm all good. I've been on the East Coast for a couple weeks.
Oh, cool. What are you doing on the East? Are you doing with the play or?
No, we're in Maine for July.
Oh,
So-
I see.
I just went to Detroit, by the way.
Did you? How was Detroit?
Best.
Was it?
Oh my God. it was
Everybody
amazing.
talks shit about Detroit.
Who does?
A lot. Like the general consensus
No,
is that.
no. Detroit rocks.
Well, I've heard that too. I guess I've
It's
heard
amazing.
Detroit Rock City. Why do you like Detroit? Why did you like Detroit so much?
Motor City.
Yeah.
Why did I like Detroit so much? People were awesome.
Mm-hmm.
They're making. What language can I use?
You can use whatever language you want to use.
Okay, they're making amazing stuff.
Yeah. You guys.
No, they're making just incredible shit.
Yeah.
There's like an energy in that city that they are just they're doing stuff. They're making things, and it's this crazy thing of like you see one block and the buildings are in just complete disrepair.
Yeah.
And the next block you see this unbelievably gorgeous. You just feel something's moving in a way that I don't think you necessarily feel in New York or LA.
It's also more. I find Detroit to be one of the more American cities. Like you feel that that's an American city, and maybe it's because it's right in the middle. Like it's not quite rural, but it's not this sort of urban thing that LA or New York is.
I agree. There's a very unique vibe, and I'd never been there before. And the food was incredible. The music was great. Watching people make stuff, the industry of it,
Yeah.
it's still alive, and you can actually feel the heartbeat of the city when you're there. It's very cool.
My grandparents lived in Detroit, so I spent a
Oh,
bunch
no
of
way.
time as a kid there.
What'd they do?
My grandma stayed home, but my grandfather was like at first he was a TV repairman when he was younger, but then he just became like I think he just did shady shit. Like he owned a couple.
Really?
I think he owned a couple buildings, but I don't know where he would get money to own buildings from. So he would go in and and act as super for a couple buildings, and
He's like Schneider from One Day at a Time.
yeah,
You know,
he just always
That's
had.
cool.
I'm sure he just always had
I love that.
schemes going on, but they didn't live in a nice area of Detroit, so I didn't see this amazing thing.
There are. I mean, the thing is that especially now that it has gone through this sort of, decline, and now it's kind of coming back. You see a building, and from the outside, it looks like it's just this decaying thing, and you walk inside, and there's the most glorious mural you'll ever see, and that building is going to be redone and rebuilt, and there are like skyscrapers that are on sale for $3 million.
Right.
But then it's like $150 million to refurbish them and bring them back, and so it's like this. It's happening now.
It is happening.
Yeah, and it's looking incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see it make a comeback as a city. Like,
it's nuts. So I loved it.
do you when you see stuff like that? Like, do you kind of walk around constantly being inspired? Because I feel like where you're at, especially after, the play that goes wrong is now on Broadway, and that's really performance aside, the fact that it's getting the attention it's getting is a lot due to you. When you realize that you have that kind of power to get eyes on something that deserves to have eyes on it, do you feel like, oh my God, I can just do stuff all the time?
Well, I never think of anything that way. I think of it like, oh, that is cool, and I really love that either idea or that the story or the world of it. In the case of the play that goes wrong, I saw the play in London. It killed me. It was so funny.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't laughed that hard in ages. The audience was going crazy. It just felt like, this has to go to Broadway, obviously. So I was just asking when it was going. And they were like, oh, we're just still getting it up and running here. And I was like, really? Well, if you ever want help, if I can help out in any way, let me know. And it was just out of liking it. And it wasn't like, I didn't think, nor do I, that my association with it means much. But what I do feel is that, if you can be part of bringing something that matters or that touches you to other people, then you should do it.
Right.
So that was my role.
But it's kind of amazing that you've gotten to a place now where that can happen. Like you because you wanted people to see this thing, it's on Broadway.
Well, I honestly, I think that when I saw it, it was a fully formed thing that was inevitably going to get there anyway, and,
Right.
and it was more of a selfish interest to jump in and try and be part of it.
Right, to jump on this now because this is going to be big regardless. So let me be the guy.
It wasn't like I looked at it and thought, okay, this is the best, way to make a profit. I wasn't thinking about the money of it. I thought, the money and the success of something, whether it does box office always works itself out. Meaning it's like that cannot ever be the driver. But what I did feel was if everyone, including myself, is laughing this hard, it's a universal thing. Which, by the way, the play has proven itself to be. It's in a number of countries, translated into multiple languages. There's like a universality because it's a very physical comedy.
Yeah,
and it's fun to you see 10-year-old kids, you see 150-year-old, not that old, but you see
Close.
old people, you see young people. It's an amazing thing to watch people react to this thing.
and it also works because like you go to a play hoping that bad things happen. Like you want to see somebody
Isn't that
forget a
funny?
line.
That's
You want
true.
to see something because that's the whole reason that live has an attraction to it.
Yeah.
Is because something unpredictable can happen.
Well, every time there's a performance, you get a report if you're involved in the play of like, when did the curtain go up, exactly how long the acts were, what was the audience reaction and everything. And the other night, one of the actresses literally in the middle of the play got sick and had to step out at halftime and be replaced by the understudy for the second half, which, and then I wish I'd been there because I don't know if the audience necessarily knew that was not part of the play.
Right. I'm sure they didn't. I mean, it fits into the play that you would try to pass off this person who's obviously
incredible,
different.
It is such a physical play.
Yeah.
And there's so much that's sort of old, sort of silent movie-ish kind of physical stuff that it's unbelievable looking backstage what has to go right for it to be the play that goes wrong. Like,
right.
It's an amazingly choreographed, very precise performance. And these people who created it, I mean, what's so lucky is we have the original cast members that were the creators of the play, originated the roles on Broadway now, and they're there for about another month.
Yeah.
But watching them work together is kind of a brilliant thing.
It's also amazing because, like, in a world of CGI and stuff in movies that you've been in, to watch a play have this much stuff, like you have to understand, if you go see this play, you'll see what I'm talking about. People have to be standing in the exact right spot at the exact right time. Like the choreography has to be just so because the set's falling down and this thing is, and people are either going to get hurt or the comedy the timing is going to get lost.
It's so true.
If it doesn't go exactly right.
You remind me, a few years ago, I went to, it was at UCLA, and they were showing an old Harold Lloyd black and white, comedy, and he was a silent movie performer and just this brilliant guy, like Buster Keaton, Chaplin style. And there was this one movie called Safety Last, and he's climbing up the side of this building, and the audience, there were like 1,000 people in the audience, it's a big place, were screaming, watching him nearly slip and fall and keep climbing up this clock tower. And it was because people watching knew it had to be real because it was a 1917 or something movie that there was no CGI then.
Right.
But people were screaming in the audience in a way that they never scream at movies, watching a near miss. And there's something to what you're saying. The play that goes wrong is that same thing of there's stuff physically happening in front of you that is sort of undeniably, it's so timing dependent, it's so tricky, and in some cases, potentially very dangerous if they don't do their job right.
Do you take that back when you go back, you see this play and then you help get it to Broadway? You go back to movie making. Do you take any of that with you? Like, I want more of that.
I think you take
tangible.
Yeah, I think you take everything that you experience that feels like, oh, that works with you in some way. And look, it's hard not to see that and be inspired in terms of the irreverence of it. It is such a silly, fun, night at the theater, and I feel like watching people react the way they do to it. It does make me feel like, oh, comedy, just film, TV, stage doesn't matter. It's especially in this moment, it is so valuable to get to go somewhere and just have a completely like silly, fun, laugh. And that's what the play that goes wrong does.
Yeah. Do you have a project that like you did? Because you've done so much now. Do you have a project that you thought it got so big early on that this is going to be it? Like this one is going to be it for me, and I don't know if I'm going to be able, because a lot of people do that, right? They have a breakout, whether it's the series, whether it's Star Trek, whether it's something that got big to the point where you were like, this is what I may not be able to escape from.
You mean almost like if an actor plays a character where it's like that's the thing they become?
Exactly.
I feel, I've had on a number of occasions situations where I was working in something that, I felt like it can't get either more intense or more kind of attention or sort of more focus or whatever than, my first movie was that I directed was a Mission Impossible 3. It was the, big Tom Cruise starring thing. There was no way when I was doing that I could imagine. I thought this is, it's like biggest star in the world. It's
Sure.
Like, it was overwhelming. And so the terror of taking that on and working on that movie, I thought, well, it can't get more intense. Then strangely doing the Star Trek movie, it felt more intense and a little bit more stressful,
right? Because
there was no Tom Cruise. Like there was the cast was an extraordinary cast, but none of them were sort of in a lot of them were unknown at the time, and so it was sort of like there was no one to look to go, all right, well, we're kind of in this thing together, and you've done it a million times, like Tom had. So that was really stressful.
And it also becomes like now the biggest name attached. First of all, Star Trek itself is the Tom
sure.
Cruise, right? Like that name.
That's right.
And the fact that you're rebooting the franchise. But now J.J. Abrams is the name that's attached to it. The same, like if that had gone wrong, they'd say if Mission Impossible had gone wrong, at that point they might have blamed it on Tom Cruise. But if Star Trek goes wrong, you're the name.
It's me. Yeah. So there was that, and then of course with Star Wars, it was just preposterous because it was just,
like,
so. But I will say in each of those situations, I got to be part of some pre-existing thing that was bigger than all of us and bigger than me. And with Star Wars, of course, there is nothing more. There's nothing bigger than that as a franchise.
Yeah.
But it was really fun to be part of it.
What was that decision like to do Star Wars? Because again, you don't want to be pigeonholed, but at the same time, this is like a massive opportunity. You did Star Trek; it was successful. You don't want this one to not be. It's a risk.
The decision was, frankly, it was a tough one, and there's a longer answer to it, but the short answer was it was a frightening one. But like you said, I knew I would never get this kind of a shot again, and my wife said to me, I remember when we were talking about it, and should we do it, should we not? And we'd have this plan and everything, and she just said that this is one of those things that you will regret not doing forever if you say no to this, and so you should really think about it, and Kathy Kennedy and Larry Kasdan and the group of people that I was lucky enough to work with, they were just extraordinary. So I felt incredibly, I was in great company.
Another one though, where you don't have, I mean, the returning characters are kind of secret, so you don't have a name, like you don't have a Tom Cruise in that movie to rely on. It's just back to
with Star Wars.
Yeah.
Well, we had Harrison. We had
yeah, but those, I mean, you weren't there. What they did in the movie was secret before it came out, and it was also like not contingent on them. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I do think that audiences knowing that. That Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and Harrison were returning, that was an enormous draw, and they became as iconic as the franchise did. But it's something that I loved so much and cared about so much that working on it there was the added sort of burden. I mean, it was also kind of a gift, but it was a burden of having to be playing with and working on something that mattered so much to myself as well as the incredible fan base. So it was the pressure on everyone, I think, was vaguely unbearable. But also but we also, I think, had a great time working on it. Right.
And also I think that part of having the original cast come back is that's a cosign, right? Like we're all
sure.
This universe is returning.
Yes. No question.
Is it more difficult to bring back Star Trek in the sense that it hadn't really been messed with recently, or Star Wars because it had been and it hadn't gone well?
Honestly, it's funny when you ask people of various generations what their favorite Star Wars movie is, you get different answers. Like, there are a lot of people for whom the prequels are their favorite Star Wars movie. And there are people, of course, who love the original series because that was theirs. And now there's a whole new series, and I think that you will find different answers probably every time, and that's the genius of what George created. I think it's something that will last and take on different sort of forms and have people sort of rooting for and relating to different different generations of that story. But the Star Trek versus Star Wars thing, I mean, it's a hard, they're not apples to apples. They're such different things. So there are a lot of variables in each, and so it's difficult to sort of quantify.
Yeah, they both have the word star.
They do.
They both have obsessive fan bases, and they're both sci-fi, and that's kind of right?
And I have to say, I feel like they each had their own specific and unique challenges. But getting to work on either of them, frankly, I feel really lucky to have been involved in, or to be involved in, any number of these things. That any one of them, in their own way, if you had told me when I was a kid I'd get to be part of, I would not have believed you.
Which is why the initial question of, like, did you ever think one would be the one? Because when you look at everything you've done, it is what you think. Like, you think one of these projects that you do would be what you get to do. The fact that you've gotten to do so much is incredible.
But I mean, I don't know. Don't you like look at what you do, like everything that you're doing? You're just sort of doing that thing. You don't look at yourself from the outside in and go, I just feel like every project. I remember working on Felicity, this TV show that I did with Matt Reeves. Like, we worked on that show, and it was that at the time felt like it does not get bigger than this. Like, it was like this,
and it was a huge show.
But I mean, at the time, it was like it was it, and for us, it was like, how can we work? This is it. If this is it, fine. We've got to do this. So every step of the way, there's something. I don't think comparing it is. I know I will never be involved in anything that is as big as Star Wars. There's no way. Star Wars is bigger than anything, anyone.
Yeah.
But it's not the thing. I don't think about the scale. I just think about, like, what's the master I'm serving? What is the story to tell right now? And I feel lucky to have been involved in any of it.
Yeah, and that's probably the way to survive it too, right? Is just to realize, like, this is the task at hand. Take a deep breath. I can do this, and then you just do it.
I remember in 1990, I was a writer on a movie called Regarding Henry that Mike Nichols directed, and actually Harrison Ford starred in. And I was on the set. I was 23, 24 something, and I'm on the set of this. Oh, we're in the editing room. Sam Osteen, who was this amazing editor, I remember he was joking with me that he said to me, better late than early, meaning it's better to peak in your career late,
of course,
in your life, than too early. Because I was just, he was sort of laughing at me. But the idea was that, like, how as a 20, I think I was 24 at the time, 24-year-old writer, working on a movie that Mike Nichols is directing, that Harrison Ford is starring in, the editor was basically saying, it's over for you. Like, this is it. And he was right.
Yeah.
Like, there was nothing else. What else was I going to do as, a writer? That was it. And so I've felt that again and again and again at every step of my career. Like, it can't get more lucky than to get to work on this. And the fact that it's happened a few times is really preposterous.
Do you, when you were younger, because I'm sure you don't do it now, but when you were younger, did you worry about maintaining momentum? If that makes sense. I think, like, because I don't think about it so much now, but I know when I was younger and something good would happen, half of me would be enjoying this good thing happening and working on it, and the other half of me would be like, okay, how do I make sure I keep going forward, keep going forward, keep going forward? And that was a big pressure on me.
It's funny. I felt that, but in a slightly different way. My feeling was more like I always feel like there's a sense of needing to work on something next, but it's not like again, an outside in, like, I need to keep sort of career momentum going. It's more like I have this opportunity right now to sort of parlay this into. Now, sometimes that means parlaying this thing into something that's really good and better and deeper and working on that thing. But for example, with TV shows, when I worked on Felicity, I ended up leaving Felicity as the sort of showrunner after a couple years to do the show that was called Alias. And I was on that show for a couple years. Then I ended up leaving that show to work on this show Lost that I did with Damon Lindelof.
By the way, I love that like you're naming hugely successful shows, but being like, it's this show called Alias, it's this show called Lost. Like, we all know the shows.
There are a lot of people who don't. I'm telling you, because I've made the mistake sometimes of saying, well, when I was doing Alias, then someone's like, what?
Really?
Like, yeah. You never know.
Jesus.
Please, I don't want. Do not presume that anyone's heard of anything.
I guess, but when you're coming in for an interview, you'd think they'd at least know kind of who you are, a little.
I apologize to anyone who's listening, but the truth is that every time I've worked on something, I can't help myself but think, what is the next project, and maybe it's just restlessness, maybe it's that. I don't know if I would have the patience to sit on, in one place and do, like when I look at what Matthew, Weiner did with Mad Men.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, and, when I look at what, certainly what Damon and Carlton did with Lost, they were there for 6 years working on that show, creating this, incredible, deep, mythological tapestry of emotion and character. And that was something that I don't know if I would be able to do. Working on a film for a couple years, like a focus thing, I love that, and I know I can do that. But it might just be my nature to, always be sort of saying, okay, what's the next thing that gets me excited?
And you'd like to know there's an end. There's a beginning, middle, end. Like this film will be done being made, and then I can do the next thing.
I just feel like there are, it's a little bit like someone who's sort of in their job and feels like after a few years, I'm getting a little bit restless.
Yeah, totally.
It's not unlike a thing that I think is fairly common.
Yeah.
But then I look at someone like Damon, or like I said, with Mad Men, there are a few obvious examples, and I'm so in awe of the ability and discipline to focus and work on one thing consistently for the run of the series.
Right, just so you can have your hands on the whole body.
Yeah.
So in that respect then, is it fairly easy for you to, when you have your hands fully on something, like in a director role, and then for the sequel or whatever, which you've done before, end up as a producer, so you're still hands-on but not quite as intimately. Is that easy for you because you want to move on to something else, or is it difficult to give that up? There's
sometimes a bittersweet feeling when you watch someone else, like when we were doing the last Star Trek movie and Justin Lin was directing. On the one hand, it was really fun to watch what he was doing and how he did it and his process and his people, and he was, he's an excellent guy and, great filmmaker. So it was just sort of fun to watch. And at the same time, there were these pangs of missing working personally with that cast or being involved in the story and those characters in a directorial way. But again, it's something that I think is it's such a lucky problem to have, to be watching someone going off and directing Daisy Ridley and John Boyega and Oscar Isaac, in something and feeling like, oh, I really miss those people. It's like, who am I going to complain to about this? It's like, I got to be involved in this thing at all, and now I'm watching a great filmmaker,
right.
Ryan, take on the next step. It's like it's maybe bittersweet, but it's like it's mostly sweet.
You logically know you can't complain about it, but on some level, it's like, yeah, that was fun.
Yes,
yeah,
I'm also, again, I think if you focus on gratitude and you just it's hard to bemoan anyone who got to be involved in these amazing worlds, who's complaining because they're not involved in all of the the chapters. Like, well, screw you.
When did you start focusing more on gratitude, more as opposed to whatever?
Really, just during this interview, I was like, God,
did you just figure it out, like as we were talking? Like,
what? Like, why am I not more grateful?
Because that's another thing. I think that and I only speak from my own experience, but I guess other people I've talked to, it's more difficult, maybe when you're young, but also when you haven't had as much success, to find that gratitude for the little things. When you look at other people and say, oh man, like I should be doing that, or if I was a little more of that. And I think that it becomes easier to find gratitude when you've got your own successes.
But the irony is a lot of times people who have achieved a certain success look back on the earlier days as those are the days that they're actually the most grateful for.
Totally.
And so I think in a way there's never a bad moment to start being grateful for what you are and what you've got. And I think that it's a little bit like when I'm working on something and there's some problem, and in retrospect, they're always, with few exceptions, there are always things that seem petty later. But when you're working on a project and there's this massive dilemma about what you're going to do or how you're going to make something work better or how to fix the problem, and for me to stop and think, this is the problem I get to have, like that's a very lucky.
Are you able to do that though? Are you able to, in the middle of tension?
I have to do it.
Yeah,
because in my head, because it just it sort of helps me kind of take a breath, and then it creates enough space to help find the answer. Obviously, in life, in things that are sort of real and true, and family and relationships, I mean, those are more complex and difficult, of course. But I just think, even in those situations, it's just to try and find if you focus on gratitude,
right?
It sort of gives you a sense of, for me at least, it helps me breathe. It helps me sort of find a kind of level place to try and solve the problem.
It's very, very healthy. It's a good way to solve problems. It's not something that you see that many people able to master. Did you get there with a therapist, or did you get there on your own?
My wife is someone who she's got this incredible sort of like compass of what's important. Yeah. And she's someone who, I think without her I wouldn't be as sort of aware of this, but she really helps me see that side of things. But and she, we do this thing with our kids. We do at night when we're having dinner, which is when typically people eat dinners at night.
Yeah, generally.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where in the world, obviously.
Right,
right. We at least
time zones and things.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have dinner at night, but we hold hands and we do our thankfuls. We just say what we're thankful for from the day, and it's just this little thing that we do, and it's just sort of becomes a habit to think about that.
That's actually, as opposed to like people, and I'm not jumping on anybody or putting words in your mouth, but like saying grace or praying before a meal is one thing, but when you are actually citing specific things in your life that you're thankful for, I feel like that is more of a concrete example of like this is. And
it's sort of in a way more becomes sort of what the religion of the family is for us, because it's I'm Jewish, my wife's Catholic. Our kids are confused. It's like, we have and so the idea of like just going around and talking about, what we're grateful for from the day, even if it's a 30-second kind of go around of what everyone, did. It's a kind of leveling thing to do. It helps.
How old are your kids?
We have a 19-year-old son, 17-year-old daughter, and an 11-year-old son.
So are they fans of what you do?
I think they're somewhat fans of some of the things they've seen, but they haven't seen everything. And we're not like the kind of family that likes to sort of let's sit down and watch the stuff that Dad did today. And just as we don't,
you don't bring home the dailies before dinner.
I don't.
Okay.
No, but our oldest son is interested in film. Our daughter is a songwriter, and our youngest is an athlete. They're focused on their stuff, and they know what Dad does, and they know what Mom does, but Katie works with me at Bad Robot, but they don't really. They're kids who have their own stuff, and so I think that they appreciate some of the. They never went to a premiere until the Star Wars movie. They didn't like we've kept them from that stuff. But then the weird thing can be, they'll go to school and like someone will tell them about something that is going on that they haven't necessarily seen or heard about because we don't.
You don't bring it home.
We don't bring it home.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you try to, when you're raising them as like little kids, did you try to get them into the stuff that you geeked out about? Because like I'm like a wrestling, the biggest wrestling nerd of all time, and so we have a 4-month-old,
right?
And so I'm trying to figure out, like, what is my strategy? Is it to get him in front of wrestling now and just have osmosis kick in? Or is it to just act like it's not happening? Because
so you only have one kid?
We have one kid, yeah.
'Cause what I have found, I think Katie and I both, is that our kids are born who they are. You can influence them somewhat. You can, expose them to various things, and they are who they are, man, in a way I cannot believe. And you can have...
So you're like looking at them like, where did you pick up on that?
Sometimes, but there are like, you could have, I think, a dozen kids in the same house, and each one's going to have their own, interests. It'll be interesting to see if your kid ends up becoming a wrestling fanatic like you. But the truth is that there's, you can't help but expose your kids to the things you love. And if classical music is your thing, that's what they're going to be listening to, until they can put the headphones on and choose to listen to their own stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think that, when I watch our 11-year-old, kick ass on, the soccer pitch, or I watch our daughter, write a song, or our, oldest kid, paint something. It's like, I can go, oh, that thing they got from Katie, that thing they kind of got from me, that thing they got. But it's the best thing, and this is what you'll find when your kid old enough sort of body slams you and is, suddenly is that they get better and, than you are so quickly at whatever you happen to love, and suddenly know more and do more, and watching, there's never been anything more joyous than being left in the dust by our kids, like watching them kind of do their thing as well as they, they do their thing.
Unless you realize I'm a complete asshole and just get competitive immediately with this 5-year-old.
That would suck.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
What a dick.
I was already, when you were like, they become who they're going to become regardless. I was already in my head, I'm like, oh, great. If he becomes a schmuck, I don't have to deal with it. That's not me. That's him.
That's sort of, actually, that's a good way to look at it, too. If you can, but I do think that, like, our egos would, allow us to believe that we have this influence and we are shaping these. The truth is they're kind of shaped. They're just getting bigger, and the shape gets bigger.
Right.
But their personalities, I think you can probably trace, unless there's some really specific, incident that changes them in some profound, way. But they seem to be trackable, from birth, basically.
Well, then I think my kid's bipolar because he cries all the time. Let's go. A lot of people have questions for you, JJ.
Oh.
JJ Abrams is here, and we go to PJ in New Jersey. What's up, PJ?
Hey, guys, what's up? Long-time listener, huge fan. And, JJ, I got to say, I'm a huge fan of your works.
That's very kind. Thank you.
War of the World, Star Wars, all of that. Even Star Trek. I didn't even watch the TV show, and I watched the movie, and it just caught my interest.
Thank you so
I'll
much.
say, to his credit, I was the same way. I could not care less about Star Trek, The Next Generation, none of it. Did not care. And I went and saw the movie just because it was a big movie, and I like seeing movies. Loved it.
That's
and I went and saw
nice.
and it made me interested in the sequels and now.
God. That's very sweet of you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm very grateful.
Fantastic. But my question was, how do you feel when, like, say, South Park portrayed you as rewriting the Star Spangled Banner and you come out with the same thing again? Like, I don't know. Does Matt Stone and Trey Parker come up to you and like, hey, man, we're going to shoot this at you? Or they just kind of, like, throw it up? I don't know.
First of all, I am such a fan of theirs, and have so loved what they've done over the years that there is no way. I can imagine, I guess, someone seeing themselves made fun of on that show and getting angry and taking it personally or something. To me, it is to be mocked by those brilliant guys is the absolute greatest compliment. So to me, it makes me laugh, and I'm embarrassed in a way only because it's like, oh my God, I can't even believe they're wasting their time on this. But the fact that they do it, they are so funny, and there's nothing but gratitude, frankly, to go back to the term that I feel when I watch them, do their thing, whoever they're mocking. I just think those guys are brilliant.
I would probably feel the same way. I'd go to the dinner table and say, I'm thankful that last night they kicked the shit out of me on South Park. I loved it.
But it's almost like, if you go to, back when, like, the great Don Rickles, right, was doing his thing. If you go to see his show and he points at you and he does 2 minutes on you, like, you cannot be an asshole and say that that's insulting.
Right, of course.
It is the honor of a lifetime
Yeah.
to have Don Rickles do minutes on you. Like
Right.
so for me, Matt and Trey, that falls into that category.
Thanks, buddy.
No problem.
Thanks.
Thank you guys.
What do you think about that remake stigma? I feel like you have obviously proven that remakes and reboots and bringing back franchises can be done well and successfully, but there are people who just a lot of people who generalize and put down the idea of remaking or rebooting altogether.
First of all, I think there is generally a sense of a bit of fatigue of the kind of programmed nature of what movies have become.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with TV, there's so much stuff that's happening that is groundbreaking and original, and so there's a weird movies have become TV and TV have become movies. I think that there are always the exceptions. So when you see something like War of the Planet of the Apes, which is so well done and
Yes.
so emotional and so beautiful, you go, oh well, fantastic, keep it coming.
Right.
But I think generally speaking, there's a thing of like, oh my God, like another sequel of that thing that was already a reboot. I get that feeling, and I know I'm as responsible as anyone for these things. So I may be more allergic to it than most people, but I do feel like, there's something thrilling when you see something like, Get Out or Baby Driver or Split or, the movies that are, original stories being told, even Dunkirk. I mean, obviously this is a historical, drama, but you see a movie that is not based on something that had someone with a cape.
Right.
It's just, it's something that I think is refreshing, and I hope and believe that Hollywood will, continue to go in that direction as well.
I love that, aside from Dunkirk, not the other movies that you just mentioned, specifically because I'm like a huge fan of fairly low budget but high concept done right.
Me too, yeah.
And I feel like the backlash to all the sort of big budget movies has been like, okay, what can we get done for a little bit of money?
Mm-hmm.
And they're finding more and more people that can do high concept stuff,
Totally.
which is like the funnest
I agree.
thing you can watch.
There's also, in those movies, there's something you can sort of feel the modesty
Yeah.
of them, and it's like a turn on because you go, oh, it's not some massive corporate decision. It's like people who clearly busted their ass and had to sort of be cleverer than they were reliant on the crutch of visual effects.
You can feel people's hands on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like there are a lot of examples, but, when you see Get Out, it is as emotional, as surprising, as funny, as scary as anything that cost literally 100 times that.
Yeah.
But that movie cost so little, and the result is, I think, it speaks for itself. So
Yeah.
I'm very excited about that realm of movie making.
Let me go to Reno in Tennessee. Reno, you're on with J.J. Abrams.
Hey, what's going on, Sam?
What's up, buddy?
Hello.
Hey, I got a question for JJ. Me and my old lady just got done binge watching the show Person of Interest. And it said J.J. Abrams on it. Every time I'm like, ain't that the dude that did Star Wars? But anyway, I was just wondering.
I guess you're right about the other stuff you said. Some people do not know.
Yeah. Well, I'm not big into sci-fi, so,
Okay.
either way. But I was wondering, is there going to be maybe a reboot, a comeback, a spin-off of that show? Because we was really invested in that show, and when it ended, it sucked.
Well, bless you. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. The creator of that show, Jonah Nolan, is now working with his wife, Lisa Joy, running this show that we're doing called Westworld. And so his focus is...
I've heard of that one, too.
So his focus is on that. And though I would love there to be a continuing story of Person of Interest, my guess is that, at least for the moment, until someone reboots it, someone else, my guess is that it sadly ended where it did. But there was a lot more story that they wanted to tell, but at a certain point, apparently shows end.
Right, that happens.
Yeah.
That does happen.
But
Colton,
thank you.
Colton in New Mexico. Goodbye, Colton.
I hear it.
Yeah.
I hear what he's saying.
It happens all the time. So, were you? Westworld was an interesting one because Westworld is one of those that is not low budget at all, and it's like if it doesn't work, like that's a big risk for HBO to take. Do you feel that when they're taking it?
It's funny. Westworld is something. HBO has been incredible, and the obvious investment financially that they've made in that. But also, this is a big show in every direction, and the beauty of the collaboration with them is that they've got the resources. Not that they can't spend. I'm sure they can't burn money, but these are people who get the idea of doing something that ultimately is a sort of, in terms of Westworld, a sort of wonderfully pulp idea.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do something like that, AAA, which is how Jonah and Lisa pitched it, and the vision that they have for this show, the cast that they've assembled, the scripts that they've written, the episodes that they've produced, it really is, and with what's coming up, especially with next season, there's something so exciting about it, and of course everyone feels like it's their money, meaning we don't go into a project and feel like let's just see what this is a very we're asking for what is needed because we think if done right it could be a very special show, and I think that Jonah and Lisa have delivered on everything that they've promised.
How do you do with criticism? Are you able to
Why do you think I don't take it well?
Are you able to let it bounce off you at this point, or do you dwell on it too much?
I mean, I feel like I'm probably more critical on myself than anyone could be on me, except maybe Katie, my wife, because it's like when you're married to someone you really love and they're critical, it's like that's the voice. But I do feel like it is so important to be critical, and it's so important to be criticized. Like the scary thing is ever being in a place where you don't want to listen, or that you're so hurt by criticism that you don't take it in. I think that the only way you get better is hearing people give you shit for stuff that didn't really work as it needed to. And by the way, they're right. Like anyone who doesn't like something, who voices it, is right. Yes, there are haters and there are trolls and there's that side of it, but anyone's opinion, you can't just go, oh, she liked it, she's right, and that she didn't like it, she's wrong. Yeah, so you have to go, well, the person who didn't like it is as correct as the person who did. And as long as you appreciate you're never going to please everyone, and as long as you appreciate that you're just trying to do the best you can, and you're open to people telling you it could be better, you have a shot at actually doing decent work.
How on earth did you guys manage to keep all these Star Wars secrets? Like, it boggles my mind that the stuff that happens in Star Wars is kept like, you guys keep secrets better than the government does. Everything else leaks, and nothing from Star Wars leaks.
Kathy Kennedy runs a tight ship.
Yeah?
She just does.
Man.
Yeah.
It's got to be a lot of, I'm guessing physical intimidation. That's my guess.
She also threatens people.
Yeah, that's what I thought.